Hi everyone, I'm Lucy from Sew Essential and I'm here today to share my latest makes with you. So everything I talk about is available on our lovely website and you'll find links to everything I mentioned below. And if you like what you see today, please like and subscribe because every Friday I bring you a video packed full of sewing goodness. And if you can't wait a whole week, do jump on and check out our social accounts where we're very active and we share things with you daily. So let's get started with the makes then. So I've actually got two things to show you today. And the way this evolved was that I saw a beautiful dress, I saw Holly Willoughby modelling a beautiful dress from Marks and Spencer's, which was a jersey turtleneck fitted bodice with a two-panel short tiered skirt. And I thought, oh, I really want to make that, but I couldn't find the perfect pattern to do it. And then I also wanted to use the same bodice again, but with a circle skirt to make this velvet number that I'm wearing. So I decided to take a pattern which I've worked with before, Simplicity 8982. I'll link it below for you. So this is a great jersey pattern that I've used before. I've made two dresses from it before, just using the pattern as it comes, and I was pleased with those. And then I've made these two dresses by hacking the pattern, so I did make quite a few adjustments and changes to the pattern to get this bodice. And I'll talk you through those and give you a bit of a close-up of those. But you know, if you've got a favourite jersey bodice pattern that you really like, you could just apply the same principles and get multiple looks out of the same pattern. Or you could, if you wanted to hack the 8982, if you've got that, or you wanted to buy that, you could hack it to create this look as well. And I just thought it'd be interesting to just show you how I went about it, and yeah, talk you through that. So I'll show you the velvet dress. So this is the hacked 8982, which I just increased the depth of the turtleneck. I reduced the depth of the cuffs because I just felt they were a bit big on the pattern, so I just reduced them. I'll show you how I did all of this. And then I made it a lot more fitted at the bodice, and I think I did that by, I added a centre back seam, and then I was able to take it in at the side seams and centre back seams to make it more fitted. And then the skirt that I put on it, I wanted a circle skirt. I think this is a half circle skirt. It's got the side seam, two side seams. But I really love this in the velvet. I didn't wear it with black tights when I wore it. I've just got those on today because it's absolutely freezing here. But I normally would wear this with flesh coloured tights for a more glamorous look. But yeah, the skirt was Simplicity 1200, which has been rebranded and is now Simplicity 9123. So it's a really good circle skirt pattern. I'd made this before as well and I really liked it. So I used that, and I'll show you how I went about that as well in a moment. But I made it in this gorgeous John Kaldor velvet. It's our Carlotta velvet, it's called. It's just absolutely beautiful. It feels so silky smooth. So I thought I'll give you a few tips working with this because I know quite a few people are scared of velvet, but actually this one is a joy. This is the second dress I've made in it. I made one in the wine colour that we've got previously. We've also got purple, teal and black, as well as this gorgeous navy blue. I chose to have the pile so that it feels silky when you run your hands down the dress, which is normally the way most people choose to do it. It's up to you which way you want to go. Just give you a bit of a twirl so you can see how shiny it looks. So it's up to you which way you want to go with the pile of the fabric. If you don't know what pile is, it's when you run your hands up and down velvet, one way will feel smooth, one way will feel coarse. So you just need to make sure that whichever way you prefer, that you cut all your pattern pieces out with the fabrics that facing the same way. If you do it two different ways, it could look like actually two different fabrics because the colour can look so different depending on which way round it is. So just make sure you cut your pattern pieces in all the same direction. Another tip is cut on a single layer rather than a double layer. With velvet, don't fold the fabric, just cut on a single layer. Also, when you place your pattern pieces on the fabric, put your fabric right side down and place the pattern pieces on the wrong side, because if you try and place them on top of the actual velvet side, they'll just be moving around, slipping around everywhere. When it comes to sewing the velvet, this particular stretch velvet by John Kaldor, second time I've used it, sews beautifully on the overlocker, and I cover stitched the hems and it worked beautifully, no problems at all. It's not a massively deep pile, so therefore I don't think it sort of gets squashed very easily or marks very easily as some of them might do. If you haven't got an overlocker, and use a walking foot with your sewing machine, which I did certain sections. I always like to tack my neckband in place before I sew it with the overlocker, so I use my walking foot for that, and that'll work really well. It just stops those slippery surfaces of the velvet fabric from running away from one another, keeps them all in the right place while you sew, which is obviously very important. And yeah, just always test on scraps, you know, is the other tip I'd give you. Be very, very careful with pressing velvet. You shouldn't, I always like to use a towel with a deep pile, and I put that over my tailor's hammer, my ironing board, and then you put the velvet right side down onto that so that the pile sort of supports the velvet. And then usually I just apply steam. I don't even actually press the fabric, I just apply steam and then maybe pat the seams to press them. So you do need to be careful from that point of view as well. But certainly, in my experience with this particular velvet, I'm sure some of them can be a nightmare. It's lovely to sew with and it's absolutely gorgeous to wear, and I'm really pleased with how the dress turned out. I think this will get a lot of wear over the years. It's just a nice classic sort of simple dress. It's lovely for the winter, it's nice and warm, it's comfortable, but it feels lovely and dressy and special for those special occasions. I wore mine on Christmas Day, but I'd quite happily wear it to just go out of an evening or whatever as well. So yeah, I was really pleased with that. And then the other dress I made, for those of you who follow us on the channel, you will have seen this last week. I'll put it on again in a minute for anyone who hasn't seen it, but this was the same bodice again in a viscose jersey. And this was the original Holly Willoughby tiered skirt idea. So you can see that version there. I'll put it on in a minute, but also there is a detailed video last week that I did where I gave you a tutorial on how to create your tiered skirt, how to make sure it's as gathered as you want it to be, the right length you want it to be, how to do all the calculations. So all of that goodness is there last week. I'll try and remember to pop a link to that below as well. But this fabric was absolutely lovely to work with as well. It's a viscose jersey. I'm not sure how much we've got left of this, but we've got other viscose jerseys on the site as well. But yeah, that just sewed up beautifully. So yeah, that's the patterns that I used. The tiered skirt was just self-drafted, and that's what I mean about the tutorial from last week. So there wasn't any pattern for that, and it was the Simplicity 8982 altered bodice for the bodice on that one as well. So I'll just show you now some of the pattern alterations that I made so you can see what went into that and how I went about it. So the first thing I did with the bodice, I knew I wanted a bit of a tighter fit than on the actual pattern itself, so I decided to add seam allowance to the back piece so that I had a centre back seam as well as the side seams, and then I could take it in a bit if I needed to. So all I did here was I just lined that up, the edge of the pattern 5/8 from the edge of the fabric, and then that I added a 5/8 seam allowance down there, so I joined that down the centre back, and then that gave me room to adjust if necessary. The other thing I did with the bodice pieces was I shortened them quite considerably. They were supposed to be a lot longer than I had them for the dress that I made. But as you can see here, I haven't actually cut off that excess because I thought, well, one day I might want to make the pattern at that length. Obviously you could trace it if you wanted to, but I'm quite lazy like that. And if ever I do things like this where I shorten the length of things, I like to just fold it underneath and pin it in place, and then that means I haven't permanently altered that pattern piece, but I can get the desired effect that I want. And that was really the only sort of alterations that I made to get a different fit. There were some other alterations I made, but that was down to my personal body and issues that I've got there. So I always make a high round back and forward shoulder adjustment, which there is a tutorial on our YouTube channel. I'll try and remember to put links to that below. That's because I've got a bit of a rounded back at the top, and I just need to create a little bit of extra length in the fabric to cover that area and just give me a bit more room there. And my shoulders are hunched forward, so I just have to move the shoulder seam forward slightly. But if you want the full scoop on that, there is a tutorial where I show you exactly how to do it. The other alteration I made is I just did bring the shoulder seam out slightly here, because last time I made it, it felt a bit scant on the shoulders, so I just brought it out slightly there and added some width at the shoulder there to get a better fit. Again, that's just a personal preference issue to my body. It's not alterations that I had to make, you know, to hack the pattern. Literally all I did for that was just shorten the length and just add the seam allowance down the back so that I was able to make it more fitted. And then one other thing that I tried for the first time that I thought I'd share with you as well is I noticed that there was some gaping at the front armhole and back armhole. So I just folded the pattern piece like so to remove that. And all of these alterations that I do, they're all in the Complete Guide to Fitting book by Palmer and Pletch, which is available on our site, and I'll pop a link below. This is my fitting Bible. This is where I learn everything I know, and I think it's an excellent book. So if you are interested in this, I'd highly recommend getting a copy. But yeah, they suggested to get rid of this armhole gape at the front and back to just remove some of the depth out of the pattern, out of the bodice, like so, by overlapping the pattern piece. So I did that on the front and the back by the same amount at the same point. Yeah, just reduced it by, I think it was about 1/4 of an inch or so maybe. And I did play around with this quite a lot because it was a new alteration. I did a couple of practice runs just to see how it worked, and it worked out really well actually, and it did seem to create a better fit in that armhole. I also, one of the other issues I have, because I've got forward shoulders, patterns at the front usually are too wide around the armhole, so I did alter the armhole at the front as well and took some of that excess away there for a better fit there, and that seemed to work well as well. I've still got, you know, more work to do in the armhole area. It's quite a tricky area to get a spot on fit, especially if you've got some of the issues I've got, but I just thought all of these things would be interesting for you to see. Now, because I'd altered the front and back bodice pieces by taking out some of that armhole depth and folding the pattern piece over like so, so you can see I've literally just, I'll show you how I did it. I literally just reduced the excess like so, and again I pinned it because I thought I don't want to permanently alter this pattern. You know, I might want to use it again without this alteration. But yeah, I just pinned that in place. You could slash it and remove it, or you could trace it and play around with it like that. But because I'd altered the front and the back bodice, I also needed to alter the sleeve as well. So you can see here how I did that. So again, I've just put that fold across just to reduce that armhole depth there. And then I have, trued the seam there, just to put a bit of tissue paper there to join that armhole edge up, or that sleeve cap edge up. And then I've also made that alteration on the front armhole where I've scooped it out a little bit there as well. And I just wanted to show you these things. I think it's interesting for people to see the process that you go through, that you know, it is trial and error with fitting. You know, it's very, very rare that things will just fit straight out of the packet. Having said that, often things will fit well enough. You know, I think you can fall down a rabbit hole and get too obsessed with fit, and I did that, and it almost paralysed me for a while when I first started sewing. You know, you can overfit and become too obsessed with it, but I really enjoy doing this. I really enjoy having a play around and trying different things, because very often you stumble across something that can make all the difference. So just to reiterate again, you know, I don't want to overwhelm you with all these changes I made. They were just things I was trying for my own personal fit reasons. But the main adaptation I did to the bodice pieces of 8982 to get that snugger fit was I just put a centre back seam on the back pattern piece, and I reduced the length of the bodice piece as well, and then I was able to just take it in at the side seams and the centre back to get that snugger fit, so just bear that in mind. The other thing I wanted to show you, I said I altered the neckband, so the neckband wasn't high enough on the original pattern, so this was the neckband piece. It was only supposed to be how wide? It was only supposed to be that wide, but that would have then had your 5/8 seam allowance off it as well, which would have come to there, so it would have only been a narrow neckband, and I wanted more of a proper turtleneck, so I just measured it on myself and decided how wide I wanted it, and I just took 5/8 off and then doubled that, so I just cut double the width of that once I'd reduced it by 5/8, and that was enough to give me that deep turtleneck and have the seam allowance to attach it to the bodice. And then with regards to the sleeves, I didn't like the cuff on the 8982 pattern, so it was supposed to be that was the piece originally. So finished, it would have been that deep without your 5/8 seam allowance at one edge, and I just thought that was too deep. I didn't like it. So what I decided to do was I did it half the width, but then I worked out, obviously I've then reduced the cuff piece massively, so however much I reduced that by, I then needed to add in onto the sleeve and lengthen the sleeve, and I did that at the lengthen and shorten lines, because obviously you know, you don't want to just add it to the bottom, because that bottom would just get wider and wider then, and the shape of the sleeve would change. So I used the lengthen and shorten lines here. I just slashed the pattern piece, added the tissue in to lengthen that sleeve enough so that when I used that shorter cuff piece it would still fit me. So yeah, that was all the alterations I did to those pieces. And then with regards to the Simplicity 1200 or 9123 circle skirt, it was, I just doubled the pattern piece so that I could cut on the single layer, because I was working with the velvet. So I just traced the pattern piece and then stuck it together, and I just used the side seams to reduce the width and to fit it to the bodice. So again, it was a bit of trial and error. I sort of measured the waist of the bodice and checked that against the waist piece of the skirt, but I knew that I would be able to reduce at the side seams if I needed to get the skirt to fit the bodice. So that was pretty straightforward and simple as well. Okay, and then finally I'll just show you the other version of the dress for anyone who didn't see last week's video. So I've got this tiered skirt, which was a double width of fabric at the waist and then 1.5 widths of fabric for the second tier. So I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Really love wearing it. It's really comfortable and warm. Perfect for winter. Definitely got Laura Ashley vibes, I think, with this ditsy print, which I really like as well. It feels very on trend with the tiered skirt and the ditsy print. And I just love a jersey dress that feels like it's like almost like a t-shirt on the top and then has got a nice skirt on it. It's just a nice way to dress up but not feel too overdressed, if that makes sense. And I've really enjoyed wearing this dress. It's the second time I've worn it in 2 weeks, so obviously a bit of a winner. If you want the full details of how to make the tiered skirt, it's all in last week's video, a step-by-step tutorial. Don't forget the patterns I mentioned today, the circle skirt pattern for the velvet dress and the bodice pattern that I used for the turtleneck for this dress and the other dress as well. They're all linked below, as is the Complete Guide to Fitting book by Palmer and Pletch, which is my fitting bible and gives me the confidence to play around and try all these different things. But hopefully, you know, I've shown you today you can get more than one look out of one pattern. Also hopefully giving you the confidence to have a mess around, maybe hack some patterns, try some alterations, or maybe it's just interesting for you to see anyway. So I hope you've enjoyed it today, everybody. As always, if you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.